Good morning, everybody. Happy hump day. It is Wednesday. It is Wednesday, right? February
Last time
12th.
I checked.
Mama Manila had a rough night, so I'm kind of delirious, and I don't know exactly what day it is. I know it was my mom's birthday yesterday, and I think that was a Tuesday. But here we are.
It was a Tuesday.
I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rawl. You are tuned in to the Ted Manila Information Show, or TMI for short, where we bring you way too much information. And as we have been saying from the get-go, if you're familiar with our previous work on Sputnik or RT or Wall Street Journal or Ted's Cartoons, this particular show, we cover everything. We covered kind of a cultural phenomenon yesterday about parenting. Today we're going to talk about politics. So it's everything in between. That's what we do. And we drop a couple F-bombs. So just a little bit of warning. We're live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. So please be sure to like and follow the show, whatever platform you are consuming the media on, especially if it's YouTube and Rumble. Because according to producer Robbie, those thumbs ups and those follows go a million miles in advancing the show to show up in the algorithms for other people to discover us as well. So we would appreciate it if you're consuming, you hit the like and the follow button, the subscribe. So on today's show, we are going to be talking about the Democrats as a whole entire party in unison now threatening a government shutdown. And Ted, we know that both parties do this. I think less so with the Republicans. They don't use it as much as a cudgel.
No.
Do you think they use it as much?
No, you have not slept. Okay, first of all, Democrats, to my knowledge, have never threatened a government shutdown before.
Republicans they did last time with Trump's first go around in the office.
Yeah, but they never. I mean, is that true? I don't even know if that's true. But certainly, this is a Republican strategy. And this is something Republicans have done over and over and over again. It's not a Democrat
right now. Maybe
strategy.
the government's actually want it to shut down. I think they actually.
Well, I've done some cartoons that at least made me giggle. That's always a good test for me if I can make myself laugh. About government shutdown and the torturers at Guantanamo are like, all right, everybody go home, and then the drones are running out of gas and falling into the desert,
falling out of the sky, just
exactly. Yeah. The police have to go home and stop beating up black motorists. It's like, government shutdown.
I think. Well, we'll get into it later, but I think. Especially given this baseline that we have just kind of drawn out in the last minute, I think it would be an actual boon to the DOGE team if it does. So
yeah, well, it's ironic, right? Because they are DOGE is part of the government, sort of, and
contractors, right? But here's the thing: if the Democrats do that, I feel like Elon would welcome it and be like, okay, great, because now it'll make it easier for us to see which essential services are truly essential, and then just you keep adding rather than look at everything as a mass whole of is that essential? Is that essential? Is that essential? Who can we fire? Who can we fire? Now you're like, okay, these are essential services, Medicare, Medicaid, stuff like that, the military. Then everything else you're like, oh, we might need this.
Is the military essential? No.
I think so to some degree. I think
we could do without 99% of it, no question about it.
I don't know about 99%, but
yeah, they did a great job protecting us on 9/11. They're awesome.
I don't think. Well, that's not them. That's an intelligence issue, and
no, that's them. That's totally them. I mean, you tell me that in, let's say, Russia, China, Iran, France, there's hijacked planes flying around airspace for 2 hours. And they're
should they have shot them down?
Yes, they should have. If I were on one of those planes, if one of my loved ones was on one of those planes, if my cat were on one of those planes, I'd be like, shoot it down.
Rather than hit New York City.
Yeah, don't you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's just a... Yeah, I mean, it's a hard freaking call.
And by the way,
you don't shoot them down over New York City, though.
They did give that order to shoot it down. on 9/11. Cheney gave the order, and there's considerable evidence that Flight 93 over Pennsylvania was shot down. I mean, the engine landed 12 miles away from the crash site. Okay, it didn't bounce. Okay, I mean, there was a trail of debris.
Miles.
There was a 12-mile trail of debris. So either you believe the Todd Beamer drink cart of death theory, or you believe that it was shot down. I mean, especially if you read the 9/11 Commission report, it talks about minute by minute when the order was given, how long it would have taken to intercept that plane, and there was enough time, ample time. And so it's kind of like, well, so did they miss it? I mean, they didn't miss it. They knew where it was. So it's like, I mean, that's...
Man, it's a gut-wrenching call. It's probably the right call, but...
It's the only call. It's not even something you have to think about. I mean, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. It's like,
really?
You're going to say... as opposed... And even if you go with Washington, which has a smaller population and density than New York. I mean, I wouldn't look, if it was Allentown, Pennsylvania was the target, I would make the same decision. You can't have a plane crash into a populated area. You just can't. If you have a chance to take it out over a field somewhere,
that's for a whole other show, because, I have a lot of questions about New York City, about the Twin Towers, Building 7, the
really?
lesser known. I think
we should totally do it. 9/11. We should totally have
like anniversary.
We should have like maybe a truther versus an anti-truther come on.
Because I'm neither, right? I don't know. I just know that there are gaps in a lot of stories. There are gaps as far as like engineers go with how the Twin Towers came down.
Not really. Not really. I was an engineering major, and I got to tell you, most of those stories are crap. The 9/11.
I don't know.
Steel is never burned at that temperature. Sure it does. Sure it has. I mean, and not to mention that those buildings, the method of construction was hanging curtain construction. It was going. The thing is, that would not have happened. Do you remember? I mean, I think it was a B-29 that struck the Empire State Building in the 1940s. You look it up; it's true. That's a smaller plane than the planes the 9/11 planes, but still, it was loaded with gas. And it caused a lot of mayhem. Right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, and but the building didn't come down because the Empire State Building has 12 redundant construction support systems.
No kidding.
But the World Trade Center only had 2, and they both failed that day, which is, basically the whole building was suspended by the four corners of it. And then everything hung in between. And part of that was necessary. Part of that was cheap union construction. Part of it was needed in order to, because it was in a very windy location.
Well, we also don't construct things like we used to in the 20s.
No, well, we're not willing to spend as much money. I would
love to hear somebody or people debate this topic or explain more to me.
Yeah, no, that's a great topic, because there's so many people, especially like on the left and on the right, who totally don't believe the World Fair.
The World Fair building construction outside of Chicago. What year was that? 1920. What year was that? That we hosted the World Fair. But we've had it a few times. We had it in 1964 in New York, 1939 in New York. No, I think
there's are you thinking of the Columbian Exposition?
Columbian Exposition, that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Where
1893.
There are like that's it. The truthers around that are like, oh, how are these buildings constructed? They put up this whole town, look Corinthian style, blah blah blah, and then suddenly we destroyed it. We were able to build these in like a year. Turns out
because they used to do shit well back then.
No, it turns out the whole setup for that Columbia Exposition thing, it was made of, everything was like fucking paper mache and art materials. It wasn't a permanent building structure. We just did it where Chicago now sits.
Yeah, it's like a Potemkin village. If you've been to New York, Washington Square Park in the Village, there's the arch, the Memorial Arch, and that was meant to be a temporary structure, and then they ended up redoing it as a permanent structure. The Eiffel Tower was meant to be a temporary structure. It was just like
kind of an art installation, no?
yeah, and then the Parisians just liked it so much. They were like, no, don't take it
I
down.
would love to do like an architecture thing and maybe involve a little truther stuff in there, because that's not entirely my world. But as many of you know, I am not opposed to wearing my tinfoil hat.
I know you're not. And I mean, we'd have to be careful with YouTube because I know they have like a whole misinformation, disinformation policy. And
really, as far as like having a conversation about it, people can't even have a conversation.
Well, that's the censorship problem. I don't have any problem giving airtime to 9/11 truthers or anyone else. I mean, even if I don't think that what they're saying is accurate, I think that's part of the problem. I think that
it's worth.
I don't think it's up to me to judge. To decide who's real.
I think everything is worth. Wrong. Everything is worth having a conversation, and I don't understand why conversation is categorized as misinformation or disinformation. Because if this were real life, if we're walking around with these cameras streaming on us while we're having lunch with friends or having beers with friends at the bar, this is the kind of stuff people talk about in real life, and people like being a fly on the wall and hearing those discussions, right? As they scream and yell at their monitors, objecting to what we're saying or whatever. But YouTube does have that censorship problem where they suddenly label you disinformation and their algorithms, really push you down because they're like, oh, that's fake news. Well, not everybody can be news.
No, and today's and the thing is, here's the thing. I mean, I would say, first of all, today's fake news turns out to sometimes be tomorrow's true news. But also, here's the thing. A substantial percentage of Americans don't believe the official narrative of 9/11. With the exception of what I talked about, I do. And but the point is,
I don't.
If millions of Americans think that some have a certain point of view, even if that point of view is crackpot, that point of view needs to be talked about, discussed, allowed to air. Otherwise, it gives it feeds into the narrative that they're being stifled and censored because there's something to hide. So it's always talking is always better. Telling
more
people to shut up just makes everyone suspicious. That's why we have we still can't settle the Kennedy assassination or 9/11 because there's always been a sense that there wasn't enough transparency in the investigations.
Of course.
Of
course. So, with that said, let's hop over to
I'm skipping to story 2 because there's some breaking news related to it, and then I'll go to story 1. All right, let's jaws it.
Hold on, let's hit that.
Okay, Ukraine has offered to strike a deal with President Trump for receiving continued American military aid in exchange for a U.S. role developing the Ukrainian mineral industry, which could provide some rare earth minerals to the United States, which are, of course, needed for a lot of high-tech stuff. Trump said that he wanted a deal like that earlier this month. It was proposed by Zelensky as part of his plan to strengthen Kyiv's hand in future negotiations with Moscow. Speaking of which, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense now, says that a return to, this is breaking right now, a return to the 2014 borders of Ukraine is, quote, an unrealistic objective and, quote, an illusionary goal, end quote, in the peace settlement between Ukraine and Russia that Trump wants to accomplish. He said this in a very high-profile place at the NATO meeting in Brussels. At his first meeting with NATO and Ukrainian defense ministers, Hegseth said that Trump intends to end the war by diplomacy and bringing both Russia and Ukraine to the table. But for Ukraine to try to regain all of its 2014 or pre-2014 territory, as it's currently officially insisting, will only prolong the war and cause more suffering. We will only end this devastating war and establish a durable peace by coupling Allied strength with a realistic assessment of the battlefield. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Pete Hegseth, but I happen to be a big fan of what he's saying. That's just reality. So
absolutely,
he's going to. But just mark my words: Democrats and other opponents of Trump are going to say, and the neocons who dominate the news media are going to say this is a sellout. This is a selling out to Putin. This is Vichy type behavior.
It's fucking realism. It's being realistic. The U.S. side via Ukraine as its proxy is the loser. We haven't
They
won
have
any
lost.
war.
No.
I mean, we just haven't won anything, and we only helped win in World War II. We haven't. The U.S. side of
It's
anything
true.
hasn't
True.
fully won a game,
Well,
the
okay,
game of
we
war since
did beat the
then.
Japanese in World War II. That was us.
Uh, well, the war broadly, I'm saying
Yeah,
maybe
no,
the
that's true.
Pacific Front,
The Germans
sure.
certainly never could have. I mean, let's face it. We never could have done shit without the Russians.
We were the
that was their
assist.
law. They won that.
Russia was Michael Jordan, and America was Scottie Pippen.
All right,
I
China.
mean, that's
Trump's
what it is.
chief. China, which is
Well,
the.
hold on here. We got to
what?
back up because the here's the big fucking thing is that not only is Pete Hegseth saying the obvious truth, but it's right here. It's the U.S. is no longer, the mask has come off under Trump in Ukraine. What the U.S. has wanted all along was the vast mineral wealth that prior to this, Zelensky and his parliament, they had passed laws to never mine in the country, mostly because they don't have the infrastructure to mine for all these rare earth minerals. This is the truth now. And we've heard Lindsey Graham, we've heard all of these Republicans saying this accidentally, maybe as kind of a goof when they're going through interviews, say it in passing that what they want is the land and the rare earth minerals, but they just say it in passing. And of course, the mainstream media always fails to push them on that and be like, Senator Graham, can you please expand? That never happens, especially because reporters like me are not allowed to go within 100 feet of Lindsey Graham, right? Because they'll never answer questions like that from someone like me. But here's the truth. And Trump is saying it, that they want the trade-off is like, okay, we're going to continue to support Ukraine, whatever rump state shape it looks like, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. We want access to mine your shit. Because the idea is to counter China, especially because China has been working on international deals in Africa, in Latin America, in Mexico, mostly closest to the US, where they are able to mine for stuff like lithium and cobalt. The US doesn't have that. We rely on mostly outside sources that sell to us as imports. We want our own direct access, and the way for us to have our own direct access is by owning Ukraine and by having big hedge funds develop the land, have big hedge funds go in there and create mines, and now we can counter China in this 21st century modern, Cold War. That's really what it is, and this is a Trump quote that we're looking at on the screen. Well, he wants billions in minerals.
The United States was pretty recently heavily engaged in a country where they have tons of lithium, and we blew it. Afghanistan. We let the Chinese scarf up all the mineral rights, and we didn't even, we were there 20 years. We didn't get any of the rare earths. We let the Chinese get it all.
How is that even possible that you can occupy a country for 20 years and that somehow you don't establish any mining right? I mean, could it be that the Chinese have made nice with the Taliban immediately? Could that be it? That diplomacy works better than bombs?
They didn't even have to. They didn't even have to formally recognize them. They were just one of the first countries to go in and say, "We hey, we'll talk to you. Hey, what's up?
You're the new government, okay?
Yeah, you're our neighbors.
Let's be cool.
Yeah."
Let's get to know each other better.
That's the Chinese way. I mean,
it is. And look, and now they've got deals, right? And the U.S., of course, still pissed off about Afghanistan, well, at least the CIA, because, poppy fields, opioid. We kind of want that. But now the mask is totally off, and the president himself is saying it. Joe Biden would never openly admit this in a million bazillion years. But here's Trump saying it right there. I told them that I want the equivalent of like 500 billion worth of rare earth minerals.
Oh my God.
And they've essentially agreed to do that, says Donald Trump. That's exactly what this whole thing has been about. That's always what it's been about, because like on Monday when you were out sick, when Robbie and I were discussing USAID, Ain't nothing the U.S. do that is benevolent, that's pure benevolence. We're not
That's true.
trying to save democracy. Get the hell out of here. No way. We're not trying to. No, because if that were the case, we would have never allowed Zelensky to axe the elections. We would have never allowed him to close off churches or ban languages or whatever. It was never about that, because our main goal was always to have access to their land, because the U.S. is not a freaking benevolent charity.
And it's
period.
also it's to fuck with the Russians too, to give them a hard time.
Well, that's the perk. That's the perk. What we really wanted was for us to have control of that land and not the Russians. Because if the Russians made nice, remember, the Ukrainians, because they were broke and super corrupt, that we've known for the past 30 years, and every media outlet, mainstream media outlet, openly said it for the past 30 years up until 2022, right? And when suddenly it was the beacon of democracy. But up until that point, since the fall of the Soviet Union, all the money, all the wealth and whatever that was in the retention of within Ukraine had been just gobbled up by all the corruption. I mean, everybody was corrupt, everybody, right? And now they have no industry. I mean, the only thing they had was agriculture, and that was all they had left. But as far as, like the steel industry or just anything else, it was completely decimated because it was rotten to the core by corruption. And they were asking for loans from, the World Bank and, all the outside Western sources of money. They gave them basically a bad percentage rate and interest. And then Yanukovych, or no, I always confuse the two names, especially when I don't have sleep. But then President Yanukovych.
There was Poroshenko, and then there was
Yanukovych is the properly elected one. Poroshenko is the one that was the putsch government. So Yanukovych went to Putin and said, "Hey, homie, can we have a loan? Can you give us a better interest rate than like the World Bank?" And Putin said, "Yeah." And the U.S. did not want that, because then Putin would have access to all the goods. And so all this stuff, the putsch began in 2014. And that's, this is where we're at 11 years later. It wasn't started in 2022. Everybody knows that, at least if they're watching us.
Well, now not everyone knows that, unfortunately.
No, that's true. But I want to underscore so much that now the mask is totally off, and it's coming straight from the president of the United States' mouth, saying, like 500 billion words.
Like I totally want some rare earth minerals, man.
It's like awesome. 500 billion,
like $500 billion. Anyway, we have producer Robbie has a question for us. Would Russia allow the United States to build a de facto NATO army in Ukraine? No. it would, and of course the answer is no. That's why they went to war, to stop that.
Yeah, no. That'll never happen. I think the Ukrainians, first of all, they don't even have enough human body.
By the way, it is still Putin's official position, and I think when I say this to people, they just sort of go blank. People who support Ukraine or who are positively inclined, I'm like, you do realize that Russia officially says it's fine with this if you join the EU. Ukraine can join the European Union. You can have a financial union with Europe. You can have the euro as your currency right on our border. We're cool with that. Right. We're worried about the military thing. We don't want, which can happen in that part of the world all the time. Drunken border guards at 3:00 in the morning shoot across each other between Russia
young
and Ukraine.
23-year-old guys getting
idiots,
drunk,
and they do drink like fish at those border crossings in the middle of the night. They're all drinking vodka. I've seen it, and it's like they get belligerent. They shoot at each other sometimes. They're idiots. They're bored, and like the next thing you know, under Article 5 of the NATO treaty, France and the UK and the United States have to fire ICBMs at Moscow. Even because of this stupidity. That's what Putin is quite understandably concerned about. Okay, yes, whatever you think of Vladimir Putin, who
I don't even live there, and me too. I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I don't think, like I've said this a million times, no leader of Russia, communist, fascist, Democrat, Republican, no king, queen, doesn't matter. No person who's in charge of Russia would have done anything different. It doesn't matter. It's not about ideology. It's like if you're you can't let that go.
Last bit of quote from Trump. He said, "I said to them, we have to get something. We can't continue to pay this money."
Well, he's right.
Quid pro quo. That's how it works. Like I said, the U.S. is not a benevolent charity. If we ever do anything that seems nice, just give it a couple months.
I will say I do appreciate the honesty.
I do. I do. He's like, hey, we've been funneling all this money to you, Zelensky. You've got, villas in Italy. You've got homes in Miami. Now I'm going to need some dirt, some land. I need some physical land. How many acres you got? Let's start mining. Let's start drilling.
Yeah, got to do it. All right, we got to move on here to our first topic, which we skipped over. Trump met with Jordanian King Abdullah II at the White House. That was yesterday. He reiterated his proposal to own and develop the Gaza Strip while expelling 2 million Palestinians into neighboring countries. Although I don't think there are 2 million Palestinians left in Gaza. I think it's more like 1.7 million because the Israelis have killed the rest. Although Abdullah dismissed the proposal, he did say he would be willing to receive 2,000 sick Palestinian children during the meeting. There's an estimated 5,000 critically ill children in the territory of occupied Gaza. Jordan, as well as most other Arab countries, condemns the idea of resettling more Palestinians in their own countries. Jordanian lawmakers proposed a bill last week banning the policy. Israel's neighbor to the east already hosts more Palestinian refugees than any other nation on the planet, with more than 2 million registered and accounting for 20% of the country's population. Those talks came as the three-week-old ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza looks like it's about to break down. Hamas warned Monday that it's not going to release any more hostages due to the fact that Israel has violated the ceasefire. You will have a hard time, Manila, finding any accounts in mainstream corporate media as to what exactly Hamas is talking about. But your favorite cartoonist looked into it and found out what Hamas is complaining about. Hamas agreed to send in 500,000 Israel agreed under the terms of the ceasefire to send 500,000 tents into Gaza so that people would have some shelter. Israel has reneged on that. They have not explained they haven't said why. They just decided not to send them. And so Hamas is pissed off about that. And that's what's really imperiling the ceasefire. They're making it look like this is Hamas's fault. It's really the IDF's fault. Trump said on Monday that he could cut aid to Jordan and Egypt if he refuses his demand to permanently take in most Palestinians from Gaza. I got to say, I wouldn't cry about this, Manila. Currently, Jordan receives $1.5 billion a year in U.S. taxpayer money, and Egypt gets about $4 billion a year, just shy of that. All money that could better be used here in the United States. The president also said from the White House that if Hamas doesn't release all the hostages by 12 noon on Saturday, he didn't say whether that's 12 noon DC time or local time in the Middle East, the ceasefire agreement with Israel should be canceled. All hell is going to break out, he said, while acknowledging that the choice over whether the ceasefire actually ends or not actually falls to Israel. So a lot to break down there. But Israel, this is a standard tactic for them. Israel negotiates a ceasefire, and then they break the terms and they pretend like they're the victims. They do this all the time.
Well, yes, that's just par for the course on how they operate. But well, like I always say, like we always joke about Richard Nixon being tricky Dicky, right? Like this is, Benjamin Netanyahu, I need to find a better, something that has a ring to it.
Bullshitty Bibi.
Something that rhymes with God, Netanyahu.
Bombing Bibi
rhymes with that.
You don't need a rhyme is good, but you need alliteration for sure.
Yeah.
Although Tricky Dicky didn't it just rhymed, yeah.
It rhymed. It's good. Tricky Dicky and Teflon Don. Like that there's
Fibby BB,
ring.
not good.
I don't know, but that's what he always does.
Sleazy
right?
BB.
He
I always laugh when I hear it because
goals.
in French, BB is a kid's term for penis.
Babe. Oh, I thought
maman, regardez mon BB. Bébé is baby. BB
Bébé.
is dick. It's like a kid's term for dick.
Oh. Well, even if I would apply like the Russian kids term of shit to Netanyahu, which is kakashka. Kakashka Netanyahu.
Catchy.
So it's not very catchy, but it drives the point, right? Like he's just kind of shitty. So,
no, he's such an asshole.
The worst part to me about this is that, well, Trump has now spoken up about the right of return for Palestinians, and he said no. He said no to it.
Yeah.
The crazy part to me is like, I keep saying this, that
because they'll be in their beautiful new mystery place, which I would call Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but that's me.
The beautiful condos that Kushner Inc. is about to build, along Gaza somewhere.
Yeah,
somewhere in Gaza,
or not.
I'm just predicting that. Here's the thing: is while Jared Kushner is whispering these development sweet nothings into his father-in-law's ear, somebody is forgetting to remind Trump that Hamas is not just going to give up the territory. They're not just going to go away. They're not going to be like, let's pretend like these 1.8 million Palestinians or whatever the actual count is at this point. Let's pretend that somebody somewhere takes them in. Let's just say they get displaced and they get relocated wherever, right? But then you have these tens of thousands of Hamas fighters that are not going to go with that population. They're not going down without a fight. And they're going to remain. Who is going to fight them? Is the IDF going to continue to fight them to clear the territory?
That's a big.
Trump Tower can be built.
What makes you think that they would not leave? They could leave.
They're not going to leave.
They could just wear civilian clothes and leave. The problem is that they couldn't safely leave because the Israelis would intercept them. The Israelis know who they are to a man.
I mean,
and would kill all of them.
Historical evidence would suggest that the Palestinians are not going to leave. Whether they back Hamas
they're not
or not,
they're not going to leave. They would have to, because of the Nakba, because they know what happened. I mean, they were all told in 1948, like their grandparents were told, don't worry, it's only for a few days. You'll be able to come back. They took their keys to their homes and they locked it up and they never got to come back. And that's how the Israelis are. The Israelis are bastards. They're never going to let them come back. So, they know. And
Trump is just a moron in that, like, he doesn't understand the cultural significance it is to these people. So I honestly don't think it's malicious. I know it sounds crazy, Ted. I really honestly don't think Trump is malicious when he says this stuff.
No, I agree.
I think it's transactional, and he's just thinking as a New York developer that he's like, yeah, so these Section 8 houses are condemned. Let's just move these people. Can we move them to the west side? Let me build up.
That's exactly what it's like.
That's what he's thinking. I think he's applying that to Gaza with people not telling him.
It's not unlike when he would take over an apartment building in a condo conversion, and he'd have rent-controlled tenants, and he'd try harassing them into leaving. Some of them did. He hired goons to throw like old ladies down the stairs and stuff. Like,
no.
Oh yeah.
Is this not like the 80s, the 90s?
In the 80s. Barbizon Plaza on Central Park South. He did that. And basically, the people who held firm. He moved drug dealers and goons into these luxury buildings to harass and intimidate the tenants. So, but
rent-controlled nice buildings.
Yeah, but then he ultimately, with views of Central Park, and he decided I'm just gonna. But the people who held on, ultimately, he cut them a big check. It was like.
Well, but that's only a handful, right?
And when the battle was done, and he ran into some of these people who never left and got to keep their apartments, he was just like, "Hey, good to see you," shaking hands like nothing had happened. It was nothing. It was never personal for him. It's just like, you're just in my way. I don't hate you. I'd like you to get out. because
Well,
that's what
that's
makes my
just it.
numbers work. That's what this is about. Yeah.
I agree. That's exactly what this is, and I think when he's talking to King Abdullah here, and I don't know if King Abdullah views it the same way as you and I, but I think you could see, I mean, when I go back here and you look at
He
King Abdullah's
can't.
face,
He can't
look at
take.
his face.
He could. I know. He
He's
cannot. That's awesome. He
I think
cannot
King Abdullah's
possibly
face
take. He cannot. Look, it's like this. Neither Jordan nor Egypt, Al
no.
Sisi, can accept any of these people because they'll have a revolution. I mean, it's
Of
like.
course.
I mean, it's because they'll be viewed as enabling genocide and ethnic cleansing.
That's true.
And they'll be viewed as doing that because that will be true.
And the local population have a lot of mistrust of from the Nakba, where the displaced Palestinians moved last time, that it's like gang fighting, right? It's like when a new kid or new people move into a neighborhood of anywhere in America, even, right? The new kid usually gets harassed. That's usually what happens, right? And that's kind of what happened with the Palestinians in Jordan. And obviously King
And
Abdullah
they tried to overthrow the previous king.
Well,
right?
so there's that.
So the Palestinians weren't really the best guests.
They weren't good guests.
And in the Middle East, hospitality counts for a lot. If you betray, if you're not appropriately grateful for hospitality, then that's not good.
King Abdullah's face, I think he's trying to process what Donald Trump is saying. And I don't think he gets Donald Trump that this is transactional, because for him, it's hard for him to see outside of the Arab lens because he's Arab, right? Like he's an Arab man. So it's hard for him to look at Donald Trump, have these words come out of Donald Trump's mouth, and he's looking at him like, what the fuck are you saying?
Yeah. And it's like,
not understanding.
You are crazy. But he's also America's, butt boy. So he has to do what he's told. So.
All right.
One of my favorite terms. All right, here we go here. Okay. Vice President J.D. Vance is in Europe this week for summits in Paris and Munich. At an AI forum in Paris, Vance told his European counterparts that they shouldn't be so risk averse and slammed EU efforts to regulate the AI industry and to try to regulate big tech. He was a key conduit for big tech financiers during the Trump campaign. In Paris, he said that the U.S. is an AI juggernaut that doesn't have any time for the so-called hand-wringing over tech safety and corporate abuse in Brussels, and scoffed at the trepidation of the Europeans. He left without listening to speeches by French President Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The next stop for Vance is Munich. He'll be at the security conference there, annual event in the city that brings together many of the world's leading diplomats and defense officials. Vance was there a year ago when he was still a senator, where he cast doubt on the U.S. commitment to Ukraine and called for Europe to do more to bolster its own defense. He probably will say something similar and is going to meet with Zelensky as Trump starts laying out its vision for bringing an end to the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. Biden administration had framed its investment in Ukraine's defense as a matter of values and principles, linking Ukraine's independence and sovereignty to the cause of liberal democracies everywhere, even though, of course, Ukraine is not a liberal democracy, but whatever. Trump and his allies are not interested in such lofty ideals, and Ukraine appears eager to appeal to the president's transactionalist instincts, as we talked about earlier here about the rare earths. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz described the rumored arrangement as egotistic and self-centered, arguing last week that Ukraine was better served using its resources to finance its post-war construction, not to bargain for more security assistance. Trump, however, is unlikely to worry about such things because Scholz is a lame duck who faces a potentially humbling defeat in the election later this month there in Germany. So, I think that's pretty straightforward. I will say it's a little stupid to not call for regulating AI, considering that all of the big AI companies, like Elon Musk owns one.
Palantir.
Yeah, they all want to be regulated by the government. So when an industry speaks as one and says, "Please regulate us. Our industry is dangerous," maybe you should probably listen.
Well, look, I think the symbolism of Vance going to the Munich Security Conference. I think he arrives today. Um, I think, first of all, there's a lot of symbolism. The fact that he left this particular conference before Macron or Schultz spoke, that he was just like, mic drop, I'm out, bitches. Because that's basically, that's, who are we kidding, right? He knows that the US is the big swinging dick in the room, and they don't need to, doesn't care, doesn't want to listen to Schultz's bullshit or Macron's bullshit. They're both lame ducks. They're on the way out. This guy says, I'm saying my piece. I'm saying what I got to say. Drop the mic, deuces, I'm out, head to Munich. Now he goes to Munich today, where now, Hegseth is already there. Hegseth is saying all this stuff out of DOD. Now the
How
vice
much
president,
blow do you think Hegseth has been through so far since his arrival? How many hoes?
More good stuff in Munich. I know I've had some partying in Munich. It's it's good times. But
yeah, the uptight cultures always have the wildest sex.
They do. I've been to some weird clubs in Germany. I'll leave that there. But I will say it had some of the greatest house music. Like, what is his name? Sander Kleinenberg at the time was one of my favorite house music DJs. I mean, can you get a more German sounding name? Sander Kleinenberg. But anyway, my point is, Hegseth is there pre-Vance, laying the groundwork. Now Vance is going there, and he's going to meet with Zelensky, and he's going to tell that dude, talk about having blow everywhere. He's going to talk to that dude and be like, yo, are you going to give us the rare earth stuff? Because my boy Peter Thiel here needs some cobalt and needs some lithium for these unmanned drones that he's building to terrorize the world. That's basically how this is going to go in Munich. And it's also symbolic that, remember, a couple of years ago, before the war broke out in Ukraine, this is exactly where Kamala Harris was as VP, saying, we invite Ukraine to join NATO, in her whiny nasal voice, right? And before she went into word salad.
With much joy.
With all joy, she was very joyful about inviting Ukraine into NATO. And this is when Putin was like, whoa. So what was it, in 2020 or 21 that she did that? 21 that she did that. And that's when all the shit began tumbling down the hill. That is when Russia started advancing troops towards the border, because of that first initial remark coming from Harris. And that wasn't an accidental thing. So now, fast forward all these years later, now we have a Vice President J.D. Vance going there to do the exact opposite. He's going to go over there and slap some bitches and walk out. Whether you like him or not, that's how this works. And that's whether you like the Trump agenda or not. That's irrelevant to me. I'm just stating the simple fact that there's a lot of symbolism. And when we're looking at politics and how these government officials roll, what they don't do, such as sitting around to listen to the next speaker, speaks more volumes than the actual things that are coming out of their mouths. Because the things that are coming out of their mouths are mostly lies anyway. It's the actions that they don't, when they walk away, that is the proof. That is telling about what's going to happen. And the fact that he's going to Munich today and he's going to slap Zelensky after Hegseth already, put in a few jabs. This is going to be like the clothesline, boom, body slam. And they're probably going to have like Dana White or Linda McMahon over there to kind of finish the death blow. Because these are, all these like fight people are part of the Trump administration now. So here we are. But I think that's what we're going to see come out of Munich. And the Europeans are going to lose their shit because for whatever reason, they still want to continue the fight.
Agreed. All right. Let's keep going. Marriage registrations in China have dropped to a record low of 6.1 million couples last year. Sounds like a lot, but China's a big country. That's a 21% decrease from the year before. That's insane. And the lowest number since the government began tracking data in 1986. Chinese officials are worried about that declining marriages are contributing to falling birth rates due to social norms and regulations that have long discouraged unmarried couples from having kids. The declines pose a challenge for the second largest economy in the world, which faces a shrinking workforce and an aging population. Yeah, that's us too, by the way, amid an economic slowdown. That's also us too. Those over 60 years old, that's me, account for about 22% of China's overall population and roughly 300 million people. That's close to the entire population of the US, which is 330 million, and are projected to enter retirement in the next decade. The drop in marriages is part of a decade-long trend of total marriages in 2024 were less than half of the roughly 13 million marriages in 2013. Chinese authorities have tested various measures to increase marriages, including financial incentives and speed dating programs. Part of the problem with these marriages is that, with the exception of gay marriages, you generally need both a boy and a girl for a marriage, and China doesn't have a lot of girls, right? I mean, because of years and years and years of the one-child policy, and there was a general preference for boys over girls. So when people got pregnant and they got the news from the ultrasound that they had a girl, they often, more likely than not, got an abortion, or in rural areas actually would commit infanticide and murder the baby immediately upon birth.
Baby girl.
So there's that's part of the problem also, is you just don't have enough ladies to get married. So I have the solution here, China. What you got to do is encourage a lot of sort of femi fellows to transition to become girls.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Become lady boys.
Yeah, become lady boys. That's a thing in Asia.
Yeah, but then
Thailand and places like that.
That doesn't solve the birth rate bust.
No, it's not going to solve that problem.
It might solve the marriage thing in some capacity, I guess. Bring in or create your own cast of lady boys. Cast with an E, but
or without.
No, it could be it could be like a Broadway musical thing.
Yeah, it'd be let's make it entertaining.
We could do that too. But then, Ted, I'm going to add to that because, look, there's for example, this pretty lady here, right? They're what's called the leftover women, and I could tell you from my own experience.
Oh, is that because she's over 25?
Yes.
If you're over 25 as a lady in China, you can't get married.
Not only in China, it's just
in most of the world.
Asian culture. In East, very specific to East Asian culture.
It's true in India too. Mm-hmm.
I lived through this myself. The pressure for marriage and all that stuff. They plant the seed at 18, and when you're done with college, your family's like, okay, let me set you up. So my grandma's friends, so-and-so son has an engineering degree. You should come. We're having a barbecue and he's here. You should come. And because I, had what they viewed as frivolous pursuits in journalism, because, I wasn't, a doctor, a lawyer, businesswoman or whatever. And I wanted to travel and do all this frivolous stuff. That's according to grandma's ideology. Before I knew it, when I hit 30 and I still did not have a ring on my finger, there was no guarantee in sight that this was coming. You really become a leftover girl where you're educated, you're world traveled, and you've done these things, right? That would otherwise, I would say, make a great partner for somebody, where I've sowed my wild oats. I've traveled. I've done all of these things. I'm accomplished. I'm a grown woman in my own right with my own things, my own properties, that you would think that woman is somebody you want, right? Like this woman talking on screen, complaining she's 34, she's educated, she has her own everything.
She has a nice looking coffee maker.
Look at her house behind her.
I like her coffee maker.
Condo.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, her coffee maker is great. She's complaining about how no one will marry her. She's 34. I mean, I didn't have my kid till I was about 38. So, but in Asia and very so much so in Eastern Asian cultures, maybe, I don't know if the stigma's there in the more south you go, but in the Eastern cultures, this is, you're over 30, you're an old maid and nobody will marry you.
Yeah. That's right.
So couldn't
over 25 Chinese, really.
25 is like the prime, because you're done with college and you've had a little, theoretically, right? And you've had a little bit of work experience and you've done a little bit of traveling and you've come back home to the motherland, and now you should be ready. Your oats should be sowed, and you should be able to settle down.
You only have a few years. The window's very brief. And I think,
Right.
I mean, look, this is one of those things where the culture
pretty girls. These are pretty young.
Oh no, these are all very very pretty ladies. I would say, I mean, that's part of like, the brief is like I there's like old gross American white guys who are like, I could go to China and pick up these ladies. I mean, and they try, right? But it's just one of those things where the culture doesn't work. It's sort of like here in the United States where women are now outperforming men educationally and financially in many respects. And because we still have that legacy thing where women don't want to date a guy who's poorer or earns a smaller income than she does. And so you end up with a lot of lonely people because, if our society is like, feminism has won, and there's more women with college degrees, more and more, and therefore more likely to earn a higher income. But you're like, well, I don't want to date poor guys. Well, not enough people are going to end up, not as many people are going to get married. I mean, that's just reality. Right. And it's, you want people to just sort of have this realization, like, that 34-year-old Chinese lady who you just showed, like, I don't know, maybe she's a bitch. I mean, who knows? Right?
Who knows?
But I mean, assuming she's a reasonable person,
normal,
some dude who's like, let's say 26 might be like, oh, I'll go for a lady who's a little older. Why not?
Right.
I mean, it's like
still of childbearing age.
You want people to have that realization, but it takes a long time for a culture to pivot on that. Now, what the Chinese have going for them as a government is their ability to propagandize and to create new social mores is something that we can't do in the United States. Not that we're even so inclined to try to do that. I mean, I remember when I traveled to China in the 90s, they were trying to discourage what I talked about before, the abortions of women and of female babies. And so, for example, there'd be these giant posters on the wall, like murals of like women working in like a lab, and they would be like, and they'd have captions like, "This woman is working hard to build socialism and build the new China. She might discover the cure for cancer. Would you have aborted her?" And things like, or like Chinese cosmonauts, like, "This woman might be China's first woman on Mars. Would you have aborted her?" And so like, and that does move, these things can move the needle, especially with Confucianism and a more conformist society, which China has than we do in our individualism.
Look, I'm going to say, because of the propaganda capabilities of the Chinese government, I'm going to say this. Well, let me criticize this lady complaining on 10 unsuccessful blind dates. I mean, come on, lady. 10?
So what? Yeah, get a grip. Go on 200. Then
I went on 10 unsuccessful blind dates a month easily, but like, it's just unsuccessful.
But by the way, blind dates are always unsuccessful. All blind dates are unsuccessful. Don't go on blind dates.
Yes and no, that's not true, because one boyfriend I had for long term was a blind date. And I mean, ultimately it was unsuccessful. We didn't lead to marriage.
Okay, so I win again.
But it was a successful relationship. It didn't, the outcome may not have been marriage. But we
okay, so the date was successful.
The date was successful. So, but this woman,
man, I got to tell you, I haven't been set up on a lot of blind dates. It's happened a few times, but it was really, really funny. I mean, when it happened, remember the last time it happened many, many years ago, and I called my friend. I go, "Really? Like that? You think I'm okay with her? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, do you not know me? Do you not like me? You must think I'm disgusting. Like, wow, like I hate you now." And my favorite.
Are you implying that she was not attractive?
I'm saying it, man. She was a cow, and like, and more to the point, not only was she a cow, which was not as important as the fact that she had the personality of a cow. I mean, she
Oh.
was so boring. And then there was the time. This is actually kind of a funny story. I used to be friends with this guy and his wife, and I'd spend, I'd often go over. He was my old college roommate, so I'd go and hang out and watch, movies and stuff at their house. One time I show up, it's like, oh, there's this girl here. This is my wife's friend. She's going to be here. And I'm like, oh, I'm so dumb. I don't even realize it's a setup. So Dan and I were talking about like all the books we've been reading. We both were big readers, and the ladies aren't talking. And at one point, the other lady goes, I've always wanted to do that. And I go, to what? And she goes, read. And
What?
and Dan, who turns to his wife, his then wife, his first wife of three, and then
What does that even mean?
And turns to her and to his wife and goes, "Holy shit! Like you tried to set up Ted with a woman who doesn't read, like right in front of her. I wanted to die. It was funny as hell.
I've always wanted to try that. What? Read?
Yeah, what? I've always wanted to do that.
What?
It's like, what's stopping you? It's like, if you want to read.
That's my advice to women in China. Like, you see, dating is really difficult no matter what continent you're on. It's just difficult. Even over 30, don't count it out. I didn't get married till, my latter 30s, have my kids till I was 38. Mm-hmm. And look, my message to the Chinese government is because they have control of what goes on TV, you can make it a new social norm that women over 30 are hot. That women over 30 you want her.
I always preferred older women when I was young.
So this is, this whole thing that I'm looking here from China Observer that we're looking at is about China's leftover women. So when they say that they don't have enough women, yes, numerically, that's true. Numerically. However, there is a significant portion of Chinese women who are accomplished and a little bit older.
Is like? This is like the fucking 5-1B visa controversy. When Silicon Valley says, oh, we don't have enough tech workers in the United States. Yeah, you do.
H-1B?
You have to be willing to hire some Americans who are over 40. Try that. Try that on for size.
Well, that's good. Same thing here. Like China, same thing. How about highlighting beautiful women who are still of childbearing, even if they weren't of childbearing? Or not. Right. Here, you've got orphans you can adopt. And you can build a nuclear family that way with women over 30. That's it. That's simple.
It's absurd, the leftover woman phenomenon.
That's sad. Yeah.
All right. And finally, today, well, if we keep going, it'll be tonight. Kanye West's Yeezy.com ad during the Super Bowl stunned viewers with its bizarre vibe. But then what happened next shocked the station executives who ran the ad and the media buyers who approved it even more. Kanye immediately flipped the website after the ad came on, replacing its previous content with one item, a swastika t-shirt for sale for $20 each. Up until the ad actually ran, the Yeezy.com website featured a Shopify-powered store selection of various non-branded articles of clothing, like shirts, pants, and jackets, nothing that would have been deemed a content issue. And Variety can confirm that when the ad first ran, the swastika t-shirt wasn't there. Within the hour of the ad coming on in LA and other markets, West made his switch and users saw just the $20 white t-shirt with a swastika on it. At that point, the on-air ad had already run and it was too late to do anything about it. The Yeezy.com ad went through legal approval and moved forward because there was no standards issue with the 30-second ad. It's simply a low-budget ad shot on an iPhone with West sitting in what appears to be a dentist chair while stammering. So what's up, guys? I spent like all the money for the commercial on these new teeth. So once again, I had to shoot it on the iPhone. Go to Yeezy.com. There might have been plenty of red flags that selling an ad to West might be a problem. The hip-hop star has proclaimed himself to be a Nazi, and his X account has been deactivated after spending several days posting racist and anti-Semitic comments, from declaring such subtle lines as, I'm a Nazi, to calling Hitler so fresh. That's my favorite part.
Hitler's so fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I love that Hitler's so fresh. There's so much to get in there. It's like, well, first of all, Hitler died in 1945, so I don't know if he's really fresh. Also, isn't so fresh? Does anyone still say fresh as a positive adjective since 1987? I mean, or am I just?
Guess if you're Kanye West, I mean, I don't know what to believe about. I mean, Kanye's got a new album coming out, right? So I'm inclined to think these crazy Twitter screeds are.
I wonder how many people bought the shirt.
I'm inclined to believe.
How many are RNC staffers?
Oh boy. Well, I'm not bothered by people.
I'm going to say the shirt's going to be a collectible. I'm not buying one, but I bet it really will be because it's so yeah.
It's a big pop culture thing, a moment in pop culture. It's not for me. And
I don't. Kanye, yeah, I feel like there's certain things you don't want to bring into your home, and this would be one of them.
That's not for me. It's maybe somebody even as a collector's item, it's still not for me. I don't know what to make. It's Kanye West, right? Like he's constantly getting in trouble. He's getting his wife in trouble, right? Like she showed up to the Grammys in a naked dress. It was pure sheer material.
When you say that he's getting in trouble, you make it sound like it's not intentional. I mean, getting in trouble is sort of like, oh, I didn't know people were going to be upset. Oh shit. This is not that, okay? He's a mega troll, and he's
getting in trouble.
I don't know if he's a lunatic or not. I assume he is.
That's what I mean. I assume he has some mental health issues going on. I don't know what, but something. And whether or not he actually believes it as he proclaims to be a Nazi,
or if he even knows what that is.
Or is he saying it just to be provocative or just to be an artiste?
Yeah, that could be like how Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols wore a swastika T-shirt. That was punk rock. And I mean, the context is different also. That was that was in the 70s. It was only 30 years after World War II. It's like that was about provocation. That's what that was.
This is like all, his remarks. It's not the same thing of being anti-Zionist or like pro-Gaza. He's not saying any of those things. He's just straight up being anti-Semitic and just straight up just like hating on all Jewish people, just wide out in the open. And then I don't know what to make of that. Like he has, for the past 2 years since we were still on Radio Sputnik, when he was when he had that deal taken away by Adidas to do his Yeezy shoe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then he got knocked down in rank from being one of the few black billionaires to not billionaire, but still very rich. And he's like, this is a campaign of, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's saying like, oh, this is a campaign that the Jews are out to get me, you see? But then he keeps saying these things that are anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish.
Yeah, well, like if Jews are out to get him, they probably ought to be. I mean, he's asking for it. I
don't know.
Hey, like maybe he's offering a valuable service. Maybe American Jews who are so in a lather over stupid crap like from the chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They should stop focusing on that as possibly being anti-Semitic, because it's not, or it's debatable. Let's say that, and they can focus on Kanye, who is certainly doing everything possible to make us think that he's really an anti-Semite. But also, it's like, here's a real question: if someone's insane and they are just ranting whatever, how the only difference between him and someone yelling a homeless guy yelling in the street, "I'm a Nazi," is that he's rich, right? Yeah. That's the only difference. The only reason that we're paying attention. He's just a rambling lunatic who happens to have a shit ton of money and can take out an ad and troll the Super Bowl. And I mean, That's why we're talking about him. And I know the fast soul thing is like what liberals used to say, when Trump first came to power. Well, if you just ignore him. Well, you can't just ignore a guy who takes an ad out of the in the Super Bowl and then, does this. You can't just ignore him. But on the other hand, when you give him attention, it feeds the troll. There's no winning. You can't win. I mean, it's just a reminder that capitalism is stupid.
I don't know what else to say about Kanye. Let's spend the next few minutes on our main topic. I'll hit the jaws and we'll.
I'm not a cheap date. Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts said yesterday, Republicans want to run and tell everyone that they have this huge mandate that they can do whatever the hell they want to do. Well, if that's the case, then they should put their mandate pants on, whatever those look like. Maybe Kanye sells those on his website, and do whatever the hell they want to do. But if you want us to be helpful, then you have to engage us. That he means the Democrats. And we're not just going to be there to bail you out. By the way, I should tell you, Manila, that cheap date apparently is a talking point for the Democrats right now. They had a bunch of their people out in front of the cameras saying that they were not a cheap date. Democratic votes will be needed to get I know it's lame. Democratic votes will be required to get a federal spending bill through Congress next month. That might mean holding the line to save Medicaid, USAID, and education. They might also try to force Trump to fire Elon Musk and his DOGE team. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries warned the Democrats won't support efforts to reduce the mortgage interest deduction or to slash food subsidies for low-income kids. Does the Democratic #resistance finally start here? Or will they cave like a slutty cheap date? Let's preview the budget fight.
That's the talking point. Obviously, everybody gets the memo distributed every morning, cheap date, or whatever. And they're also saying constitutional crisis, and resist Trump. And it is like a mantra. You remember those, what was it, Stuart Smiley? Is that the name on SNL? Where he did Deep Thoughts, or what was his name? Stuart. I forget on SNL. This. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Like Deep Thoughts. And then you'd repeat like a mantra over and over.
I don't know it.
That skit. Well, this is kind of how it is within the Democratic Party, and which is why I long ago abandoned it. I could not. This is not the party that I grew up believing in as a kid in the 80s and the 90s. My dad, being a union member. This is not the same party. Like, I get that the Democratic Party, by virtue of their position on things, believes in big government, right? Like they want more government for more regulation and for more, this social service or that service.
Republicans don't believe in big government? Are you kidding me?
Well, they at least don't say not to the same degree. The Democrats,
it's exactly the same degree. They just want to. They're both big militarists. There's no bigger government than
there's not a lot of daylight
trying to overthrow other countries.
There's not a lot of daylight. I'm not saying there is daylight between them these days, especially with the Democrats lurch to the far right, like as far as militarism and foreign policy goes. But these guys now, saying we don't want to save any money in the government. We don't want you to.
That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is that that the Republicans are going after policies that they, and departments that they care about, like the Department of Education was established by a Democratic president.
Sure.
And that is that's who just died recently, right? Jimmy Carter. And they want to, and they care about the Federal Department of Education. They care about USAID. Ironically, they shouldn't, because that's really more like a Republican thing. If you think about it,
they care about
it's a tool of imperialism.
The world.
Yeah. And they definitely, this is about protecting their own. I mean, a bunch of it is perverse, like trying to preserve the home mortgage deduction, which props up the real estate market and discourages, conventional savings accounts in banks and stuff like that. But it's not like they're saying we don't want to save money. That's not what this is about, right?
the Democrats have a lot of pet projects that we would like the stuff that's funded by USAID. They don't want to save money. They want to
ask me how many
they want
shits I
to
give about
fund
USAID. Like none at all. But I
they
mean,
want to fund, drag shows in Hungary. That's the whole point. And that's why they're outside picketing outside the Department of Education. They're picketing outside the old office of USAID. And now we're at the Reagan building. And now we're hearing all of these senators. I mean, it's a concerted effort to resist Trump. And to me, anytime I don't care if it's Democrats or
which they
Republicans,
should. That's what an opposition party is supposed to do.
Sure, but they're not also putting anything forward. You can fucking resist. Like fucking resist, but come at me with an actual plan. Come at me with an alternative. They don't have that.
No, that's true. Yes. Scott Stantis and I talk about that a lot on the DMZ America podcast, which, by the way, we're dropping a new one at 12:30 Eastern time today, live. But definitely here's the thing, right? Democratic Party they're going to be obstructionists. Now, in all fairness, the Republicans, let's put it this way. They're talking about being obstructionist. I mean, they didn't start out that way. They voted for Marco Rubio unanimously. They have voted for a bunch of Trump's nominees. A bunch of them have. So they've been pretty cooperative. I guess the real question here is they're threatening to behave the way that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans did when they were in the minority under Obama. And they shut down the government a few times. They threatened to shut down the government. They threatened to they had showdowns over the debt limit. I don't know how many times we talked about that on our old shows. They held up judicial nominations to the point where there was a shortage of federal judges. So the Republicans did that. We know what they did when they were in the minority. And at the time, you can go back and look it up. I defended them and said, I'm not a Republican, but they're doing exactly what the Republican Party should do, and I wish Democrats would do. So now the question is, will Democrats actually follow through, or is this the usual Vichy Democrat pussing out, like, we're going to resist, and then they just don't. And they're like, and the thing is, going for the Vichy approach is the fact that they didn't is that the Republicans got beaten up in the polls every time they shut down the government. It was always bad for them. So Democrats have to be looking at that and thinking, if we do that, we're going to get beaten up. What do we do? So, are they going to really follow through? Are they going to risk a government shutdown? And then what will they, if so, what concessions will they extract from Trump?
Could be crab season.
Is Trump even open to any concessions? Or is Trump like, fuck you, I have a mandate, I'll do what I want?
I mean, well, Ted, the government, the Fish and Game Department, they, under Forest Service, right? They let hunters and stuff know when, okay, like it's officially duck season, or it's, whatever hunting, it's deer season, it's whatever. It's crab season. You can go crabbing now. Stuff like that'll get delayed. But like I said at the top of the show, for me, I think if the Democrats do this, and they're also trying to twist it in the other direction and say that if they let the government shut down, it's the Republicans' fault. Of course, that's they're always going to spin it the other way, right? Like, even though I'm obstructing, it's his fault. That Republican over there, it's his fault. It's not mine. But
nothing wrong
as I said at the top,
that's just politics.
I think this is a boon for Musk and DOGE, because they're going to be like, cool, I don't even have to fire everybody. Everyone's just going to take a leave of absence. And then, the cream will rise to the top. We'll see where things are actually needed, what services need to stick around. And then it'll be easier for me to see who I need to get rid of, who I need
That's
to
an interesting take,
forever.
Manila. That is, I had not thought of that. I like it. It's definitely, it could end up being a jujitsu move on the part of the Republicans. You guys do your worst. Okay. Oh no, not a government shutdown.
Oh,
we would hate that.
Don't shut it down. Elon, meanwhile, is like, Mm-hmm. Ha 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 ha. Right? And he's like, okay, things that'll stay in service, the military, like things that will get shut down, park services, stuff like that. Like the National Mall. I mean, if people haven't been here, right, is it everything's wide out in the open, right? So all year round, people can, go stare at Abe Lincoln sitting in his chair. You can do all kind, whatever, right? All year. And you're eating your candy bar, your Snickers wrapper, just toss it out at the Abe's foot. I don't recommend you do that, but there's somebody there to clean up, right? So the millions of people that come through here every year, the park services is one of those non-essentials that would get shut down. So things can get awfully stinky here in downtown Washington pretty fast, Ted, is my point. Because the last time there was that 3-week shutdown, I had to drive through that area. I mean, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it might have been like an early Trump or end of Obama. I can't remember, but it lasted several weeks. And I'm
pretty sure it happened it was Obama who was the victim of most of these shutdowns.
Maybe that was it. But I do remember physically seeing what government services were shut down.
Yeah, it was a lot of parks, that kind of thing. Look, I would love to see the military shut down. We just can't bomb anyone. We're out of money. Sorry. I'm skeptical that the Democrats are going to follow through on this, just because, they talk a little bit. They never follow anything through.
You think so?
And it's kind of like, so I have a theorem that I've often called Rawls' theorem, and I hope it catches on before I die. It probably never will. Rawls' theorem is that when, that line, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Yes. No, Rawls' theorem is exactly the opposite. If someone volunteers to you that they have some sort of positive attribute, not like if you ask them. So, for example, if I say, oh, Manel, I'm a good tipper. I'm a really good tipper. I always tip really well. Now, probably that means I'm exactly the opposite. Rawls' theorem is you are the exact opposite of what you volunteer about you. Oh. So now people who are good tippers, they don't talk about it. They just tip well. And so this is kind of like what's going on here. Like when Democrats say, "Oh, I'm not I'm not a cheap date. I'm not a slut." You're a slut. Legs open for business, right? That's
use a hoe.
Yeah, spreading those cheeks, right? So that's the thing is they're hoes, and they are cheap dates. Bernie Sanders literally voted against Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, was his supporter.
Yes, she quit her seat as VP of the DNC chair because of that.
Yes. So
he's at the top of my shit ass list.
Oh,
I can't
I'm so pissed off.
I regret voting for him in the California primaries in 2015 or 16.
I can't go back in time, so I'm not going to. Right, but if I could, I wouldn't vote for him over this.
If I knew that this is who he was going to become less than 10 years later.
It's so sad. Remember that parenthetically? Remember that missive he sent out on social media right after the election? He's like, this is what happens when you abandon the working class. In a few weeks, we'll be talking. I'm still waiting for your call, Bernie. It's February, okay? It's been more than a few weeks. Pick up the phone, old timer. Let's hear what you got to say. Sooner the better. No one's getting any younger, especially not you.
Like I said, all of these idiots up there blithering and blathering on all these MSNBC shows. They're, they're just saying whatever they want to say, right? Like to be anti-Trump. Look, that didn't win you the election in 2024. That's not going to win you seats in the midterms coming up. They still haven't learned from that, is my point. You can't just say resist Trump. We're not Trump. We're going to shut it down to fight his agenda, his policies. We're going to shut it down. Okay.
Well, you can.
Shut it down.
I think,
what?
With all due respect, Manila, I think you're conflating two two issues, right? Which is, one is, can you just obstruct? Yeah, you can, and without having any kind of alternative to present.
But then what?
Well, okay, but like, that's a separate question. The Republicans already proved that you don't have to have an alternative agenda when you're resisting a sitting president. They did that to Obama. They didn't have an alternate agenda. They didn't offer anything about, say, an alternative to health care or Obamacare. No. They didn't have an alternative. They were like, repeal and replace. They never came up with anything. No, you can do that. But I take your point, and I've written about it extensively. Democrats do need an alternative vision. They don't need it for this purpose, but they do need it if they want to revive as a party. They should have direct policies for they should literally go down the list of all the issues that the polls, like the Gallup poll always asks American voters, what are your top 10 worries? Go down that list and have an answer to each one of those questions, right? Like high prices, the border, whatever.
Eggs,
big healthcare prices, whatever. College costs, blah, blah, blah. Have an answer to all. They don't have that. And your point is taken. I just think for this exercise, it's not germane. They don't, it doesn't matter. They can block. This is blocking Trump now is about trying to show their own base that they're a viable party, and they can still, they still have some nub of a micro penis left.
But the whole point to that statement, though, is that I get that they can obstruct just to obstruct, but them just showing their base that they're anti-Trump is not going to get their party anywhere, and is not going to gain them more seats, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do, like, the base is already anti-Trump. Why do you need more chum in the water for that? They already know that their base already hates Trump. There's already never Trump, to a much smaller scale than 2016 or 17, but their base is they are who they are. They're always going to be never Trumpers, and people are going to have TDS, and I get that. So that portion of the argument aside, and now going to the alternative bills that you can potentially hammer out in your committees, no one's bringing anything to the table, is my point. So that's why they are cheap hoes, is because you can't act like you're going to have a high price that, be like, I'm a classy date, but then you're going on your date and you know nothing about art or literature, or so what kind of cheap ass hoe are you? Like, what kind of 2-bit, like you're not an expensive call girl at that point. You're just some night walker hoe. So just pick a battle, get good at it, do something, and then I feel like
I disagree. I totally disagree. I mean, Trump's moving fast and breaking things. He's doing all sorts of shit that Democrats are completely, they're apocalyptic. They're apocalyptic. They're completely like
Do you think they saw this coming, Ted? Do you think they are they shocked? Do you think the Democrats are shocked?
They are shocked, and they are awed. And are they? And rank and file Democrats are so upset. The ones I talk to, they I mean, there's been stories about how psychologists' offices are being flooded with upset, depressed liberals. This happened again in 2017 as well. But they're so bummed about Trump. So the first thing Democrats need to do is show that there's things that they're willing to do to try to gum up the works to stop Trump from getting some of these things done. And it kind of doesn't even matter what they are. They just have to just show that they're a viable opposition party. And I totally agree that, like, on their short list needs to come up with an ideology. Look, that's one of the reasons they lost the election, is no one could tell you what Kamala Harris was actually going to do if she was elected president, right? Including
joy.
Her.
No, she was very clear about it, Ted. Bring joy.
Right, like I said, nothing. So the point is that so that's, you're right. I just think that that's a discrete, first things first, fuck with the Republicans, slow them down, put that stick in the spokes of the bicycle tire, fuck them up, and then, sort of say what you would do instead. But,
But you can't
one thing
do
at a
that.
time.
You can't stick a thing in the spokes without immediately turning around and be like,
Yeah, you can.
here's why.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, I think
you should always know what you're.
without.
Look, you're not. I agree with you that if as a political party of any kind should always know. Like, here's the thing, right? Like, if I somehow woke up as president of the United States tomorrow, and your friends were like, "Oh, Ted, what do you think what do you think he'll do?" And they'd name various issues. You'd probably have a pretty good idea of my answer of what I would do, right?
Sure.
But you and I couldn't do that for Kamala Harris. That's bad. So so every political party should have a coherent ideology that people can predict, right? And the Democrats don't have that. So your point's well taken. I just think we're nitpicking. I'm nitpicking with you about timing. That's all.
Oh, who's the de facto leader of the party? And then we'll go. Like, that's the thing, right? Because we knew with Obama, in the Obama era, it was clearly Nancy Pelosi and Obama together, right?
True.
But then what? Now who? Like,
believe it or not, at the DNC, and this made my head explode. It was Kamala. She was there, and everyone there was like, Kamala is still the head of the Democratic Party.
What?
She may run again. We'd like her to.
No.
I was like, you people are fucking crazy.
I missed that. Is that true?
It is true.
They believe in a potential Harris run again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like a full term run, a full 1 year run, not 12 weeks or whatever.
Yeah. I guess, look, it's not like such a thing hasn't happened before. Nixon, 1960 and 1968.
Trump will be out of the way, so.
Yeah, right. Well, Trump's an unusual situation because he actually won and then lost and then won.
Right.
He Grover Cleveland's that.
Yes. But, oh, man, I think that's just a losing strategy for that party. I think they need to reassess and don't just be obstructionists. I say be a solution, not an obstructionist.
Be forward looking. But look, being obstructionist is honestly the duty. It's the duty of a POW to attempt to escape. It is the duty of the opposition party to try to fuck up the winning team. And, that's just how it is.
Well, this is just like the Super Bowl this past weekend. It was the duty of the Kansas City Chiefs to try to hit that three-peat, right? It's only been done once in history before. They failed. They performed so poorly. We expected a better performance out of the Chiefs, and instead the Eagles trounced their asses. Like, the game was over by halftime. And I feel like that's what we're witnessing right now in Washington. The game was over by halftime. The Republicans have won. I don't think I need to sit around to see the Democrats try to flail and painfully flail into the third and fourth quarter.
No, the Democrats are in a piss poor condition, but the rebuilding has to start at some point, and you're not going to look if you can't even convince your own partisans that you're going to try to stop what they view as right-wing extremism, then what have you got? It's the baseline of what you have to do.
Just like the Kansas City Chiefs, they've got Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift.
Part of the problem, I got to tell you, one of the problems with the Democrats is the problem with their approach is that even if it works, it doesn't work. And here's why. Even if they go to Trump and they say, okay, well, fire Elon, this, that, and the other, save USAID, whatever their Christmas list is. And let's say Trump agrees to some things, and then they don't shut down the government. But then Trump just says, I lied, fuck you. And he has another year. And that's what he does, right? You can't really negotiate with him because who can believe anything he has to say? So there's that. That's part of the problem for the Democrats. If I were them, I'd just shut it down and not even negotiate. I wouldn't even say I want anything. Be like, we're just shutting it down.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
We'll see. And we got 3 weeks, Ted.
Yeah.
We will know.
We'll follow the story.
We will test Speaker Mike Johnson's medal and see if he has the stomach to handle the volatility, because people are going to shit on him too.
Well, he's been ridiculous in this. He's like, oh, the Democrats always complain when we do it. So how could they complain? How can they threaten to do it now? It's like, you do realize that you can't call them out for being hypocrites based on something that you yourself did.
You always do.
You do understand
we'll
that.
See.
It's like, you're a hypocrite for saying that I'm a hypocrite. Fucker.
You're the hypocrite.
I hate you. You're a asshole.
You're a
dick. All right, jinx. All right, with that, we should go.
All right.
Bring us out.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be back again 10 a.m. tomorrow. Mark Sloboda says he's joining us so we can really get into Ukraine stuff.
Good.
Prisoner swap. I'm
calling Mark out. Mark said that there's no way there will ever be a conclusion. Trump won't end the war.
Ooh. I mean, maybe he meant the caveats in 24 hours. I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, it didn't happen in 24 hours. So
no,
we'll see. Mark.
Well, that wasn't going to happen. Yeah.
No, of course not. But yeah, it'll be a fun talk tomorrow. It'll be
we can
all
have a
things
whole
Ukraine.
Psychological question of when Trump or any other politician says something that isn't true because it couldn't be true. Is that really a lie? If someone lies to you and says hey, I can fly, I have wings. Is that really a lie? Because it's not true. But
haha, sucker is my response. If you believe it.
Yeah, I guess.
So,
but on the other hand, it's an untruth. Anyway. All right.
Well, yes, both things can be true at once, though. So, you can also be a sucker as well as the other person saying an untruth. So there we are. So guys, we'll be back tomorrow. It'll be a fun chat with our buddy, Mark Sloboda. Make sure you guys tune in. We'll be back 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Adios, amigos.
Check out Scott and Santis and I in an hour, DMZ America podcast. Bye.
DMZ America podcast. That's Ted and Scott Stantis.
Yep.
Adios.
Bye.